Louisville, Kentucky, 1967. The summer heat pressed down on the city like a heavyweight's glove, making the air thick and oppressive. Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Clay, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow as he approached Henderson's Diner, a modestly upscale establishment that had recently begun serving African-American customers after years of segregation. Ali walked with the natural confidence of a champion, dressed in a tailored suit that fit his athletic frame perfectly. Despite being the heavyweight champion of the world, he still faced the daily indignities that came with being a black man in America, especially one who had changed his name after converting to Islam and had refused military service. "If someone can serve me a good meal without a side of disrespect, I'll consider it a victory outside the ring," he muttered to himself as he pushed open the door. If this story has already made you feel something, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. The cool air inside was a welcome relief. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and the clinking of silverware. Several heads turned as Ali entered, some in recognition, others in surprise. He was used to the attention, the whispers, the pointing. Fame had its burdens, but it also had its privileges, or so he thought. Ali was shown to a table near the back, not quite hidden, but certainly not showcased. He ordered coffee while reviewing the menu, his fingers lightly drumming on the tablecloth. 3 police officers sat at a nearby table, eyeing him with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. He recognized that look. It was one he'd grown accustomed to since taking his stand against the draft. "Refusing to fight for your country," one officer said loudly enough for Ali to hear. "Some champion." Ali ignored them, focusing instead on the waitress who approached with his coffee. "Will you be dining alone today, Mr. Ali?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "Yes, ma'am," he replied with a gentle smile. "Just me and my thoughts today." As the waitress walked away, the officers continued their commentary, each comment louder than the last. The restaurant grew quieter as other patrons began to notice the tension building. Ali remained composed, sipping his coffee and reviewing the menu as if nothing were happening. When he finally placed his order, a steak, medium rare with potatoes, one of the officers stood up and approached his table. "You know," the officer said, looming over Ali, "some folks think you don't belong in here. Some folks think you're disrespecting everything this country stands for." Ali looked up, his eyes calm but intense. "I respect this country enough to stand by my beliefs. That's what America is supposed to be about, isn't it, officer?" The officer's face reddened. "Don't get smart with me, boy." The word hung in the air like a thrown punch. Ali's jaw tightened, but he remained seated, his hands flat on the table. "I'm not a boy," he said evenly. "I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, and I have every right to be here." The officer smirked, exchanging glances with his colleagues, who had now risen from their table. The restaurant had fallen completely silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding scene. The manager, a balding man with nervous hands, hovered nearby, clearly torn between intervening and staying out of it. "Champion or not," the lead officer said, "you need to understand your place." With a sudden, deliberate motion, he picked up Ali's coffee cup and poured the remaining liquid onto the boxer's immaculate suit. The dark stain spread across the expensive fabric like an oil spill. Several gasps echoed through the restaurant. Ali didn't flinch. He remained perfectly still, his eyes locked with the officers, his breathing controlled, as if preparing for a round in the ring. The Rolex watch on his wrist, a gleaming symbol of his success, caught the light as he slowly raised his hand to brush away a drop of coffee that threatened to fall onto his tie. "Is this how Louisville's finest treat all their citizens?" Ali asked, his voice measured but carrying throughout the now silent restaurant. "Or just the ones who look like me?" The second officer stepped forward, placing his hand on his holster. in an unmistakable threat. "You're causing a disturbance," he said. "We could take you in for that." A disturbance? Ali raised an eyebrow. "I'm sitting here ordering lunch. You're the ones disturbing the peace." The third officer, who had remained somewhat detached until now, moved closer. He was older than the others, with silver at his temples and a more weathered look. On his wrist was a gold Patek Philippe watch that seemed incongruously luxurious for a police officer's salary. "You should leave," he said, not with the same hostility as his colleagues, but with a cold finality. "Before this gets worse." The manager finally found his courage. "Officers, please. Mr. Ali is a customer here. He has every right. Stay out." "Of this," the first officer snapped, "unless you want trouble for your establishment." Ali slowly stood up, towering over the officers. Despite the coffee stain on his suit, he maintained a dignified presence. "I won't be leaving," he said calmly. "I've ordered my meal, and I intend to eat it." The first officer's face contorted with rage. With a sudden move, he grabbed Ali's arm and attempted to force him toward the door. What happened next would be recounted in Louisville for years to come. Across the restaurant, a man in an impeccably tailored Italian suit observed the scene with growing concern. Edward Donovan, a visiting business magnate from New York with investments worth hundreds of millions across the country, had been quietly enjoying his lunch when the confrontation began. As the CEO of Donovan Communications, one of the largest media companies in America, he recognized Ali immediately and recognized injustice when he saw it. Donovan pulled out a small camera from his briefcase. He always carried one, a habit, from his earlier days as a journalist before he built his fortune. Discreetly, he began taking photographs of the officers harassing Ali. When the first officer grabbed Ali's arm, the champion didn't resist. He didn't need to. His presence, his composure in the face of humiliation, created its own kind of resistance. The officer's grip seemed pathetic against Ali's strength, not his physical strength, but the strength of his conviction. "You can force me out," Ali said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "but you can't force out the truth. This isn't about a restaurant seat. This is about dignity. This is about rights." The officer tightened his grip, his face flushed with embarrassment. As he realized how many witnesses were present, "You're under arrest for disturbing the peace," he declared. At that moment, Donovan stood up. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, officer," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of wealth and position. He held up his camera. "I've documented this entire incident. Mr. Ali has done nothing wrong. You, however, have assaulted and threatened a citizen who was simply trying to eat lunch." The second officer turned toward Donovan. "Hand over that camera, sir." Donovan smiled slightly. "I don't think so. In fact, I've already exposed the film and placed it in an envelope addressed to my lawyers in New York. One of my associates took it to the post office 10 minutes ago." This was a bluff, but delivered with such confidence that the officers hesitated. The restaurant had begun to fill with murmurs. Several other patrons had stood up, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. A young black waitress had tears in her eyes. An elderly white couple shook their heads in disapproval, not at Ali, but at the officers. "My name is Edward Donovan," he continued, walking closer. "I own 13 newspapers and 4 television stations. I'd be very interested in running this story tomorrow. Police officers harass world champion. How does that sound for a headline?" The officers exchanged glances, suddenly uncertain. The third officer, the one with the expensive watch, stepped back slightly. The tension in the restaurant hung like a storm cloud about to break. Ali remained standing, coffee stain prominent on his suit, but dignity intact. Edward Donovan had closed the distance between his table and the confrontation, his million-dollar presence impossible to ignore. The 3 officers found themselves in an unexpected predicament. What had started as an opportunity to put a controversial figure in his place had transformed into a potential public relations disaster. We were simply responding to complaints, the first officer said defensively, releasing his grip on Ali's arm. What complaints? Donovan challenged. I've been sitting here for 45 minutes. Mr. Ali entered, sat down quietly, and ordered. The only disturbance came from your table. Several patrons nodded in agreement. An elderly man at a nearby table spoke up, his southern accent thick, but his words clear. The gentleman's right. The boxer didn't do anything wrong. The manager, sensing the shift in power, stepped forward with more confidence. Officers, I must ask you to return to your meal or leave. Mr. Ali is welcome in this establishment. The third officer, the one with the expensive watch and silver temples, seemed to realize the situation had spiraled beyond recovery. Let's go, he said to his colleagues. We have actual calls to respond to. As they retreated, the first officer couldn't resist one parting shot. This isn't over, Ali. Ali finally allowed himself a small smile. It never is, officer. The fight for respect never ends. After the police left, the restaurant erupted in a mixture of applause and awkward conversation. The manager approached Ali with profuse apologies and offered to comp his meal and have his suit cleaned at the restaurant's expense. Donovan extended his hand to Ali. Edward Donovan, it's an honor to meet you, champion, though I wish under better circumstances. Ali shook his hand firmly. I appreciate your intervention, Mr. Donovan. Not many would have taken that risk. No risk at all, Donovan replied, gesturing to his Bentley visible through the window, a chauffeur standing attentively beside it. Men like us must stand together against injustice, regardless of color. The manager returned with a fresh cup of coffee and the news that Ali's meal would be ready shortly. As Ali and Donovan sat together, an unlikely friendship began to form. The boxing champion and the media mogul, both powerful in their respective arenas. You know, Donovan said, what happened today is exactly why your voice matters. Those officers thought they could silence you because of who you are. They were wrong, Ali nodded thoughtfully. In the ring, your opponent is clear. Out here, he gestured to the world beyond the restaurant, the fight is more complex. It's against systems, against attitudes, against history itself. As they finished their meal, several patrons approached to express their support or simply shake Ali's hand. The young black waitress whispered, "Thank you," as she cleared their plates. Even the elderly white couple stopped by their table to apologize for what they had witnessed. When it came time to leave, Ali and Donovan walked out together into the Louisville sunshine. A small crowd had gathered, word having spread about the confrontation. Ali addressed them briefly, not with anger or bitterness, but with hope. Today reminded me that change comes one meal, one conversation, one stand at a time, he told the onlookers. I fight in the ring because that's my job. I fight outside the ring because that's my duty. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you do, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.